Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into the fascinating history, the science, and the totally surprising environmental impact of seed balls. Now, whether you know them as seed balls, earth balls, or seed bombs, these little spheres have completely captured the imagination of gardeners and environmentalists alike. So we're going to break down exactly what they are, the science behind why they actually work, and, absolutely most importantly, the massive responsibility that comes with using them. Let's get into it.
Okay, just look at the sheer, transformative power contained in this tiny, unassuming little ball of clay resting right there in the palm of a hand. I mean, it really doesn't look like much, does it? But within that little sphere is the potential to entirely transform a patch of earth. It's basically a self-contained life support system for a seed. And it's actually a tool that's been used to restore ecosystems in literally some of the harshest climates on the planet.
Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll hit the origins, why they work, how to craft the perfect one, the hidden ecological dangers, and finally, planting with purpose.
Starting right off with Section 1, the origins of seed balls, an ancient survival tool.
This isn't just some new modern trend. We can trace the chronological journey of the seed ball all the way back to ancient Egyptian riverbanks. Farmers back then used clay-coated seeds to repair their farms after the annual spring flooding of the Nile. Fast forward to the Second World War, and a Japanese plant scientist named Masanobu Fukuoka rediscovered this method. He essentially wanted a way to increase food production on the mountainous island of Shikoku without completely disrupting traditional rice crops. And then, jumping to 1973, the modern seed bomb was officially born. Liz Christie and her green guerrillas started tossing what they called seed grenades, which, fun fact, originally used condoms filled with seeds and fertilizer, right over fences into neglected, empty lots in New York City just to beautify the urban landscape.
Let's move to Section 2, why seed balls actually work, the science of survival.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the compost and clay are not just dirt. Not at all. They act as a microscopic fortress. Think about it. When you just scatter bare seeds on the ground, they are incredibly vulnerable. They can get blown away by the wind, baked entirely dry by the sun, or just eaten by hungry birds and rodents. The clay in the seed ball acts as this hard protective armor against predators, while the compost provides a sponge-like matrix that holds onto whatever moisture it can get. So the seed just waits safely inside until sufficient rain breaks the ball down, giving it the exact right conditions to root and grow.
Now, what's really interesting is this data from a University of Arizona cooperative extension study. They tested different nutrient bases to figure out what exactly makes the best seed ball for arid land restoration, and they tracked the germination rates. Surprisingly, standard potting soil actually had the lowest success rate. Mushroom compost did a slightly better job, but using nutrient-rich steer manure as the compost base, that yielded the highest seed germination rates by far. The high levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the manure basically act like a supercharger for the seedling's early growth.
And to add to that exact same study, researchers made another fascinating discovery. They found that packing more seeds into a single seed ball does actually boost the overall chance of germination, up to a point. But surprisingly, the physical size of the seed ball itself, whether it's half an inch wide or 2 full inches wide, doesn't inherently make it any more successful. So keeping them small, roughly the size of a marble, is perfectly optimal and just highly efficient.
All right, let's get our hands dirty with Section 3, crafting the perfect seed ball, a recipe for life.
You really only need a few basic ingredients to get started with this, but the ratio is absolutely everything. You want roughly 4 parts of compost, and remember, as we saw, manure works great, to 1 part powdered dry red clay, by weight. A quick warning, don't use pre-mixed wet potter's clay or gray riverbank clay. You want the dry red powder. Then add your carefully chosen native seeds and just enough water to bind the whole shebang together. The process itself is incredibly straightforward. First, mix your dry compost and clay together in a bowl. Next, add those seeds, making sure the dirt mixture thoroughly surrounds them. Then comes the tricky part. You need to add water very, very slowly, because if it gets too wet, it's going to turn into sludge, and that moisture might actually cause the seeds to sprout prematurely. You just want it to feel like workable clay. Finally, roll them into small, marble-sized balls. Following these simple steps ensures your seeds are perfectly insulated. And here is exactly what your final product should look like. You want to set them out on a tarp or maybe a piece of wax paper and just let them dry completely for 24 to 48 hours. Once they are rock hard, they're fully dormant and ready to be planted in either the spring or the fall, ideally right before a good heavy rain.
Okay, we've lured you in with a fun craft, but we need to make a crucial pivot for Section 4, the hidden ecological dangers.
Because understanding the immense responsibility of using these is honestly the most critical part of this explainer. So picture it. You've got your pocket full of freshly dried seed balls. It is extremely tempting to embrace that 1970s guerrilla gardening spirit and just toss these into every empty lot, median strip, or nature reserve you see. But I want you to seriously pause and consider this question before you do. Should you?
The answer is a resounding no. When we look at good intentions versus unintended consequences, the risks become incredibly clear. Yes, of course, you want to beautify neglected spaces, but failing to carefully vet your seeds can accidentally introduce invasive species. And once an invasive, non-native plant takes root, it can rapidly outcompete local plants, completely drain soil nutrients, and effectively destroy the local food webs that native birds and insects rely on to survive.
This quote from the Environmental Nature Center hits the nail right on the head. We absolutely must be cautious. Because it's not just about obvious invasive species, it's about genetic integrity. For example, common yarrow is a plant native to Southern California. But if you just go and buy a generic wildflower seed mix online, those yarrow seeds might have actually been sourced from Europe. Tossing those European seeds into a California landscape introduces foreign genetics that can severely disrupt and weaken the locally adapted plant populations. You are, effectively, playing God with nature.
So as a quick summary, throwing seed bombs blindly can do far more harm than good to the environment. You risk introducing non-native plants, disrupting regional genetics, or simply placing plants into foreign environments where they just don't belong and will ultimately fail. Furthermore, if that seed ball gets wet but isn't in a place where it can actually sustain life long term, you've caused premature germination, completely wasting the seed anyway.
Which brings us to our final segment, Section 5, Planting with Purpose, Respecting the Land.
The biggest issue with the romantic, idealized notion of rogue, unauthorized guerrilla gardening is that it completely ignores the invisible work already being done. Land managers, park rangers, and conservationists very often have highly specific multi-year ecological restoration plans already in place for public lands. Tossing a handful of random seed balls over a fence into a protected area can literally introduce weeds that undo months or even years of their strategic, painstaking hard work.
So instead of going rogue, follow these steps to make sure your efforts genuinely support biodiversity. First, always secure permission from the landowner. Second, look for local conservation organizations or nature centers in your area and volunteer your time. Third, use resources like local native plant societies to source seeds that are truly native to your specific zip code, not just your country, your zip code. And finally, follow the guidance of local ecological restoration experts. Seed balls are an amazing tool, but they need to be used in coordination with the experts, not against them.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Seed balls are an incredible piece of ancient technology, right? They are scientifically proven to help life thrive in extremely difficult conditions. But true environmental stewardship requires a lot more than just passion. It requires a profound awareness and a deep respect for nature's delicate balance. Knowing the immense power packed into just a single seed ball, how will you use this knowledge to genuinely heal your local ecosystem rather than accidentally disrupt it? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this inspires you to get out there and get your hands dirty, responsibly,